She says, "I'm afraid of you, Mike."
Mm-hmm.
Which is a vulnerable thing to say.
Yes, and brave.
Very brave.
And that shows trust also, because if she didn't trust him, she would pretend everything was fine and figure out a way to get out.
Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit. I'm Tracie Guy-Decker, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit, because pop culture is still culture, and shouldn't you know what's in your head? On today's episode, I will be sharing my deep thoughts about the 1991 Kenneth Branagh film, Dead Again, with my sister, Emily Guy Birken, and with you. So let's dive in. Em, I know you saw this movie. I think we saw it together.
We did. We saw it in the theater together.
But tell me what you remember about Dead Again.
I had a crush on Kenneth Branagh from this film. I'm not Roman. Scissors.
Yep.
There's a gender swap, reincarnation thing. And gosh, so I will tell you a few years later, because that came out when I was 12. So when I was 15, I was working my first job at Joan and Gary's Original Bagel Bakery in Owings Mills, Maryland. Terrible place to work. But there was a guy who came through the line one day when I was working the register, and there was something about him where I was like, this guy, like, I'm 15. This guy was an adult, not my type. There was something about him where I'm like, I'm really attracted to this guy. Why? And I realized, like, a few minutes later, his mannerisms reminded me of the character that Branagh plays in this film. And he was also, like, he was blonde as well. But anyway, so that's what comes up when I think about this film. And I know there's probably more in there, but that's it. So tell me, why are we talking about it today?
Yeah, so this film, I also loved it. And I remember, like, loving the fact that Emma Thompson, who stars as the female lead, both female leads, because there's two stories, was Branagh's wife at the time that they were married. Like, I remember loving that there was, like, a real life romance between the two of them that, you know, and that I thought that was I don't know, it felt really significant to me at the time. And so it popped up on our list, and I decided to do it now. In part, it was like, it's a little bit of a, you know, we try to mix it up so it's not all comedies or all whatever. And so this is like this psychological thriller. So that's part of why it was time for a different genre. But specifically, Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson, and sort of the romance between them, which they're now divorced and have been for many years. I wanted to sort of look back at the romance and see if that holds up.
She's married to Willoughby from Sense and Sensibility now, who's younger than her.
Is she?
She is.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
go, Emma. I loved him as he loved me. Sorry, that's what I think of when I think of Willoughby. Okay, so I really wanted to look at the romance and, like, just was curious. Like, it looms large in my imagination as, like, smart. Like, that's like the it was a smart movie, you know, but also still very entertaining. So, like, I was just curious if it holds up. So that's why it's on there. So it's not like a super deep sentimental reason the way some of our movies are, but I thought it could be a fun look back. And mostly I do want to talk about actually the storytelling and some of the choices that are made for the storytelling. And also, I do want to talk about the romance between in both stories between these two characters and what I may have been kind of internalizing from them, and sort of the smart piece of it too. Like, I think sometimes the discernment between genuinely smart and elegant and, like, pretentious for me in particular can sometimes be a complicated nuance that I'm not always up to the challenge, especially in 1991 when I was
15.
Yeah, 15.
And so I have opinions about Kenneth Branagh as Hercule Poirot for that very reason.
Well, I
strong opinions.
I actually sort of think my overall sense of Branagh is part of actually why I bring that up in general. Because I think Branagh has a hard time discerning between smart and pretentious. So
I also wanted to mention, because we've talked before about why I became a French major, and 40% of it was Beauty and the Beast, and like another 30% was Yvette from Clue. I've realized recently that a big part of it was because I read Agatha Christie novels as a young child, and I read not all, but many Hercule Poirot, and he would just say stuff in French with no explanation. And at the time, because I was like 9, I was like, so apparently if I want to read, I need to know some French, because I thought all books were like this.
Yeah.
So anyway, side note, that can go on our bloopers, because it's nothing to do with Dead Again. Please continue.
All right. So let me see if I can give a synopsis of the plot. And actually, I don't want to share a lot of details. So I'm going to try. I say this every time, but I'm going to try and keep it pretty tight. So the movie opens with like these like panning over headlines from 1949. Like, I think the first or one of the very first things we see is the word in all caps, murder. So through these like headlines from newspapers, we learn about Roman Strauss, who allegedly murdered his wife, Margaret. He's a composer. He allegedly murdered his wife, Margaret, with scissors, and he dies for it, like gets the death penalty for it. All of the articles are written by the same journalist, who is called Gray Baker.
He's the smoker.
Yes, played by Andy Garcia.
Yeah. I remember that.
So that was in 1949. So now we learn the story of, in today, which is in the early 90s, a woman, a Jane Doe, shows up at a convent school for boys run by the Catholic Church in the home of Roman Strauss. Like, that's actually made clear pretty quickly. So like the old estate that was owned by the man who allegedly killed his wife, who was a composer, is now a school for boys run by the Catholic Church. And this woman, an amnesiac who is not speaking, shows up like clawing her way into the estate that once was Roman Strauss's. One of the nuns she's staying there. One of the nuns wants to keep her like a pet.
Love her and hug her and call her George.
Yeah. Please, Father, can we keep her? No, take care of her because, she's obviously been through some really bad stuff. She has these night terrors where she wakes up screaming, even though she actually isn't speaking at all. And so the nuns are really worried about her. They want to hold on to her at the school, and the father, the priest who runs it, is absolutely not. This is not our problem. But he calls Mike Church, played by Branagh, who is a private investigator who actually grew up at the school and owes him a favor or something.
Isn't his name Church because he was a foundling?
Yes. So the priest calls him to get his help to try and figure out who this woman is. So he takes her to have her picture taken, and his buddy who works at the paper, who's Newman.
Wayne Knight.
Yeah, him. So they're going to put her in the paper. He tells a story about having amnesia briefly, didn't remember who he was. And then his daughter showed up at his bedside, and he all of it came rushing back. So he's trying to give her hope that it's going to come back. And Mike takes her to the county psychiatric hospital, and it is bad. Real, it's pandemonium and violent and scary. So he takes her back to his apartment, and he clearly kind of has the hots for her. We see him kind of chastising himself for not being cool. So that's happening in the modern times. Enter Derek Jacobi as Mr. Madsen, who runs an antique shop and dabbles in hypnosis. He saw the paper article because they decided to run her picture and say, do you know this woman? Get in touch with Mike Church. So Derek Jacobi shows up, and he hypnotizes her just very quickly, and she speaks. She talks, and something happens, and Mike's I don't believe it. And Derek Jacobi, whose name is Mr. Madsen, is she wasn't talking at all, and now she is. Why don't you come by the store? So he's kind of a charlatan. Well, he's not a charlatan because he genuinely does hypnotize, but he uses it for sort of unethical purposes. We witness him. He's an antique dealer, and we witness him he's got a woman under hypnosis who was a child in the White House with Teddy Roosevelt, and he's asking her about specific pieces of furniture. like where he might be able to track them down. But he is genuinely a hypnotherapist or whatever. So he regresses the Emma Thompson character, who we don't know her name yet, though Mike is calling her Grace. It goes to black and white, and we are seeing the same two actors playing Roman Strauss and Margaret Strauss. And it's really smart when I look back at it now, because in that first session with Mr. Madsen in his shop, she's getting very agitated. And so he says, stay distant from it. Just be an observer. Don't let yourself get into it. And so she says, it started the day that Roman met Margaret. And so it's about reincarnation. We're led to think that she is the reincarnation of Margaret. And so the storytelling, like visually, is very interesting because we've got the black and white of what happened in the 40s, and then we've got the color of what's happening now. So we watch these two stories kind of play out as the Grace is trying to figure out who she is. People are after her. Like one person, like a man comes and pretends to be her fiance, but it turns out like Mike realizes he has some detail wrong. And they're like trying to find where she is. Like they end up at her apartment. She's an artist and all of her art has all these scissors in it. And at one point, like she and Mike have this romance and they fool around one night, and it matches exactly the way that we saw Roman and Margaret fool around the first time. Like they were out in the rain and Margaret said, I'm soaking, I'll ruin your couch. And he says, I'll get another. And like the same thing happens. And to the point that Grace says, this is just what happened with them, you know? So it leads to like a suspicion between Mike and Grace, so much so that, and this scene I do want to name, like, I want to tell the story a little bit more detail. Like she's a little afraid of him.
Well, because I even remember that in the trailer, him saying, like, I'm not Roman, like trying to, like, I'm Mike, I'm not Roman.
Yeah. So she's a little afraid of him. And I can't remember exactly what order. At one point, Madsen regresses him, and he is there too. I think that happens.
He who?
Mike regresses back and is in the 40s in the same house and whatever.
Gotcha.
And that's where we learn the gender swap that you remember. Mike is the reincarnation of Margaret, but that's a big reveal at the end. That's after Grace is afraid of Mike and she says, I'm afraid of you. And he's a little annoyed that she's afraid and sort of hands her this, here, take the scissors. Because like the scissors were the murder weapon. Take these scissors. And he like goes, like drags her through his apartment and hands her all the scissors. And then he hands her his gun and says, you're scared of me here, train it. And she's like really upset, crying. Like he's being abusive with this. And finally he sort of comes to and like realizes how much he's upset her. And he's sort of like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I would never hurt you, Margaret. And he calls her Margaret. And then she's like, oh! And she like points the gun at him. Which I remember that very clearly, like even from 91, that I would never hurt you, Margaret. And then both of them kind of like freaking out when he uses the name of the dead woman about her. So meanwhile, Mike has met in the very beginning this psychiatrist or psychologist, Robin Williams.
I thought Robin Williams was in this. I thought I remembered that.
Yeah, I had forgotten.
Oh, and this is where he says something like, it's karma. You buy now, pay forever, something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, he does. So the Robin Williams character, whose name is Cozy something or other, was a therapist who lost his license for sleeping with patients. And it's just this like kind of gross character.
Unpleasant. Yeah.
Very unpleasant, but like really smart. And so Mike comes back to him a couple of times, also like knows about hypnosis and stuff. Mike finds him because a man has left him money in his will.
Left the Robin Williams character?
The Robin Williams character money in his will, like $11,000 or something, which in 90, I didn't look up what that is in $91, but
probably at least 3 times. So yeah, like over 30.
So, and apparently the deceased had been impotent and Robin Williams had treated him. And so like, there's a great line where Mike's like, he must have had a hell of a hard on when he wrote his will. Anyway, so Robin Williams sort of says like this, you see this sometimes, like these, like people just keep coming back. It's fate. You know, you keep meeting the same people over and over and over again. That's part of why Grace is afraid of Mike, is that she's afraid that they're like, it's going to happen again.
They're repeating the same story.
Exactly. So we learn that Mike is a reincarnation, and we learn that he actually is the reincarnation of Margaret. And so then we see Grace back at her apartment. Her name is not actually Grace. That's what Mike was calling her, but I'm just going to call her that. That with all of this artwork that she's made with scissors in it. And Mr. Madsen is there and is like, you cannot trust Mike. Like, it's going to feel really good, but that's how fate works. And it's going to end. This cannot but end badly. And he actually hands her this tiny antique gun from his shop to like protect herself. And then we see the scene that you remember with the smoking. Mike actually finds Gray Baker, who was the reporter who was reporting on the death of Margaret, but we learned through the flashbacks also had a bit of a romance with her.
Like a flirtation.
Yes, but like an ongoing flirtation between the two of them. Mm-hmm. We are not given the impression that they ever actually had a physical affair, but there was a romance between them. So Mike sees him, and throughout we've been hearing like Robin Williams say to Mike Church, and like we've heard a couple of times, you're either a smoker or you're not. So pick which one you are and get busy doing it. Gray Baker is a smoker.
Because he's got a trach, doesn't he?
He's got a trach. He uses this like device that he has to hold up to the tracheotomy in order to speak. And he like begs for a cigarette. The nurse who let Mike into the room said, no matter what he says, don't let him smoke. And he actually smokes. He lights the cigarette in his mouth, but then holds it to the hole in his neck in order to.
Image has stuck with me. Not that I ever thought I'd be a smoker, but it was just like, nope.
Well,
and that's Mike's reaction too. He's like, I am not a smoker.
Yeah, that was the point. That was the point. So in the flashbacks, we saw that Baker was there like the day that Roman was executed and asked him if he actually killed his wife. And he like leaned in and whispered something in Gray Baker's ear, but it turns out he didn't whisper. He kissed him on the cheek. Baker no longer believes that Roman was responsible. He thought that he was at the time, but he no longer believes. And Mike's like, well, who would know? Who did it? Who could have done it? And Baker says, if anybody knows, it'll be the housekeeper. We've seen from the beginning there was a housekeeper and her son, Frankie. So Inga and Frankie, who were with Roman, helped him out of Germany. The implication, I guess, is that he was Jewish because he got out of Germany and his wife at the time died when they were going over the mountains. And at one point, Margaret's like, why would a woman with a bad heart like want to make a trip over the mountains? And he was like, we had to get out of Germany. But they never actually say it explicitly, which was kind of weird to me watching it now that they avoided it so completely. Anyway, so we can come back to that maybe. We saw some like friction around Inga and Frankie like in the past. I don't remember exactly who says it, but maybe it is Mr. Baker. But apparently Inga and her son opened an antique shop called the Laughing Duke, which is the name of Mr. Madsen's shop. His name is Franklin Madsen. Now, he's played by Derek Jacobi with this British accent. But we see Mike confront Inga, who's a very old woman now, and she tells the whole story. Frankie killed Margaret with the scissors, and he had a stutter from the beginning. His speech impediment got worse, so she took him to England, where they gave him treatments, including with hypnosis. And he became obsessed with it. So the sort of exposition is that he speaks with a British accent now because the speech therapy was
in England.
And that's how he got into hypnosis. So Mike knows now, and Inga hands him the anklet. There's this whole thing with the anklet between the two of them. She hands him the anklet, which had gone missing, and he thanks her and leaves. There's this very creepy scene where Inga turns the TV on. Like she stands up and has to like actually press a button, which now seems like crazy. Like you can turn it on with a button. And then within like 30 seconds, a hand reaches over and turns it off. And it's Frankie. And she says, I couldn't live with it anymore. And he's like, I understand. And then he puts her to bed and then he smothers her with a pillow. So in the final scene back at the apartment, Grace is freaking the fuck out when Mike shows up, like, because she's sure he's gonna kill her and that this is like fate and he's come to kill her. And I mean, because Mr. Madsen, who we now know was Frankie, had been saying as much, right? And so she's freaking out, but he manages to get in the apartment. He's trying to explain, and he says, "This is for you." And he reaches into like his breast pocket, and "this is for you" is a phrase that has come up again and again and again. That's what Frankie said when he killed Margaret. We also see Roman sort of say it in like a vision that didn't actually happen. So she freaks and shoots him in the shoulder, and he is unconscious. But then she like looks to see what he was getting out of his pocket, sees the anklet, and she's like, "Oh God, what have I done? What have I done?" And then Frankie shows up, and we know he's just murdered his mother. And she's like, I shot him. And he was like, "Thank you. You saved me the time." And then I don't remember exactly how he incapacitates her, but he's gonna kill them both. But then Mike wakes up. There's a big tussle, and Frankie ends up impaling himself on this giant statue of multiple scissors that Grace has created.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they live happily ever after. Not Frankie.
Grace and Mike.
Grace and Mike.
Well, and it ends with a scene of them kissing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I remember that being like, I've never seen anything like this before. This is the end of the film. But, I was 12, so.
Yeah. It ends with sort of a kiss that is, I don't think it's meant to be that moment. I think it's meant to be sort of like
in the future.
Like synecdoche, like a part for the whole of their lives together. They've broken the curse or whatever. So yeah. And there's like smaller details that help kind of like create through lines that I did not share, but that's what happens. So it passes Bechdel because Inga and Margaret talk about stuff besides men and boys. So we have, per Alison Bechdel, are there more than two named female characters? Yes. Do they talk to each other? Yes. Do they talk about something other than a man or a boy? Yes. So it passes Bechdel. So that's cool. Margaret is kind of a badass. She's a pianist and has a successful career. And Emma Thompson's portrayal of Margaret, I feel like, is nuanced and whole. She's in love with Roman, but there's a lot more to her. And like, she pushes back on him when he behaves badly. And like, their relationship, as we see it, actually feels really fucking healthy for 1949. I mean, not perfect. Like, they're having money trouble. And so like, things are not great. And he gets jealous of Mr. Baker, Ray Baker. And she like withholds information from him about Baker, and he knows it. So I'm not suggesting it's like perfect.
It's not something to emulate necessarily. Right.
But it also doesn't feel in any way like abusive or
demeaning or belittling.
Yeah, exactly. So that feels really good in some ways when I think about the romance, like what I was imbibing about the romance. And we're led to believe that, Margaret's on the phone with Gray Baker, cutting things off with him, and Roman sort of comes in on her, like on the phone with him and hanging up. And we're led to believe that that's what led to the jealous rage that ended in her death. But then when we see what actually happened, like they both apologize and like hug, and it's like it brings them closer. So those sorts of things like feel good in rewatch. The 90s romance, maybe a little less so. Because like initially, I don't know, I'm talking in draft here, so I'm open to like questions and pushback. But initially, it's entirely caregiving from Mike to Grace. She's amnesiac. She's terrified, and she doesn't know why. And she doesn't know her name. She can't speak. Like she is mute. And so initially, like, he brings her home to his apartment to take care of her. At one point, like, she's washing her hair in the sink, and he's like, "Oh, you missed a spot in the back." And he like helps her with a bit at the back of her neck. And it's clear he's like turned on by it. He doesn't do anything untoward, but like, it's clear he's affected by this. And like, it feels like all about sort of her looks and her vulnerability.
Don't they say something when they take her picture for the newspaper? Like, "Oh, we'll definitely get people writing in about this."
Yes.
Because of how beautiful she is.
And they do. Like, we hear Mike fielding a call. She has a Irish claddagh ring. And so they say, that's one of the ways they're using to try and identify her. And, like, we hear him talking to somebody who's like, no, I'm not. You tell me about the ring. A coiled snake. Yep. Okay. And a tattoo. Right? Like lots of people, like, see the picture and are trying. So, yes, for sure. And then as the romance develops, like, it seems a little bit more kind of reciprocal, but still, like, there's no there for me. And in fact, there's that moment, like, I can't remember the order, but I'm pretty sure they've already had sex in that moment when I would never hurt you, Margaret. What led him to say that and call her by the wrong name, though, that moment when he's, like, shoving scissors at her and, like, hands her his gun is horrible. Like, it's really bad. And he's not physically abusing her, but it's abusive.
Yeah.
Especially given where she is and where she's been.
And he's upset. Like, that's like him being upset about picking the bear.
Yes.
That's a man versus bear level of upset, because he's upset not because she is freaked out. And, like, he's mad at her for not trusting him, even though she has no memory, she's reliant on him, and she has no reason to trust him.
Well, and all this weird shit is happening where the only memories she has are from 1949, where she thinks she was killed by the person he now is.
Yeah. So that's that is a very much a, like, take the scissors, take my gun. That's a, like, the kinds of meltdowns there were many men who had. Like, it's one of those, like, it might be apocryphal, but I read about, like, a man taking his sister out into the woods and, like, leaving her there and, like, see if you like the bear now. And it's just like, this is why we choose the bear.
Like,
right here.
That's I think that's exactly it. That's because she says immediately prior to that, I'm pretty sure she says, "I'm afraid of you, Mike," which is a vulnerable thing to say.
Yes, and brave,
very brave.
And that shows trust also, because if she didn't trust him, she would pretend everything was fine and figure out a way to get out.
Right. And so
I do real quick want to just explain what the man versus bear thing is, just in case our audience doesn't know it. It's been about 6 or 8 months ago. It somehow came up one of those interviews on the streets where someone was going around asking women, would you rather be alone in the woods with a bear or with a random man you don't know? And almost universally, women chose the bear. And, like, men, upon finding this out, a lot of them had a complete and utter meltdown. Like, how dare you say that? About me. And women were saying things like, well, the bear's not going to act different depending on whether or not there's other bears there.
Yeah.
The bear's not going to try to lull me into a sense of safety before attacking.
The bear's not going to blame me for what I was wearing.
And if I get mauled by a bear, no one's going to say, what were you wearing?
Right.
So anyway, you were saying, like, recognizing the level of trust that someone shows by telling them that you're afraid or that they're hurting you, that shows that they trust you enough to share that with you.
Yeah. And so I think, like, the reason I'm staying with this is because I came away from this movie, like, with a deep kind of, like, wistfulness about the relationship, about both sets, like, both relationships, the one between Roman and Margaret, but also the one between Mike and Grace. And I'm not sure that was warranted, that wistfulness, that, like, of, like, 15-year-old me thinking of some future romance. And there's a degree to which I think I didn't see it because I was 15. But there's also a degree to which I sort of was like, oh, but he's really her, right? He's Margaret reincarnated. And so somehow, like, the gender swap made that abusive moment okay.
Yeah.
I'm putting quotes around that in my head, which, no. Just no. Sorry, baby Tracie. That was not okay. I don't care what his previous life was, right? And so that I'm staying with it because I really wanted to just say that out loud. Like, there's a level of sort of, like, romanticization of that like moment of friction and then its resolution in the end of the film that made me think that that is like okay. And it's not. I mean, like everybody's allowed to have a mistake, but like I'm left with the impression that like Mike Church would do that again.
Yeah, there's no sense that like he says, I'm sorry, you know, I'd never hurt you. But that's what every abuser says as soon as they're done slapping you around.
Like, he doesn't say, I'm sorry I overreacted. He doesn't say, I'm sorry I took it personally that you're scared. He says, I'm sorry, you know I'd never hurt you. And so I don't know that you'd never hurt her. You just did, even though you didn't physically.
Yeah.
Like, she was in anguish when you're shoving these scissors into her hand and then the gun. So, yeah. So anyway, I wanted to name that because in terms of like what our project is, that's the kind of moment that I want to surface and shine a light on so that I can maybe work to unravel that in the furniture of my own head.
Sure.
So in terms of romance, I feel like that's the big thing that I want to like investigate. Now, in terms of storytelling, in some ways, like Branagh did an amazing job. Like I was like, even I knew what happened. And when I was watching it 2 nights ago, I still was on the edge of my seat. You know, and so in some ways, like, good on you, Kenneth Branagh. Like, you did it. And when I shine a light even a little, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, like, we see, like I said, this is for you is like a line that comes up repeatedly. And we see that from Grace's dream that Roman says it to the guard, and Grace was Roman, but Roman didn't know that's what Frankie said. Roman wasn't there while Frankie was killing Margaret. In fact, Roman was like finishing, he had like writer's block and was working on this opera, and the first and only time they heard it was he was like finishing it while she was being killed. And like Gray Baker knew that Inga would know what actually happened. There were only 4 people in the house. One of them's dead. Why is it so hard to figure out which of the 3 did it?
Yeah.
And like, are we meant to then believe that Roman was protecting Frankie? Why? I mean, we saw that he protected Inga because she and Frankie like helped him get out of Germany. And Frankie's a kid. So maybe, but like for me now looking back at it, I wish I'd seen a little bit more of something.
I do want to, just in defense of Kenneth Branagh, is that's what you get with mysteries.
For sure. Yes.
Because you've got the economy of characters. You've got like, there's a reason why the close rate on like investigations into murder is so much smaller than what you would come to believe based on police procedurals and mystery novels and all of that. And it's because the author controls how many characters are involved. Those sorts of things, like even the Queen, Agatha Christie, will have things that if you spend time thinking about it are kind of a leap or kind of a like, seriously, wouldn't that be obvious? That only by going on the like suspending your disbelief. And you don't even have to with Agatha Christie because she was so good. But just like in the moment, it's like, yes. And then only if you spend time thinking about it afterwards, you go like, that does make sense.
Totally. That's what this is. While you are watching the movie, you are totally believing it. And like the reveal when you realize that Mr. Madsen is Frankie is like, ugh. I mean, it hits. Terrifying. It really lands. It really lands. So for sure, completely. And, you know, I'm allowed to say like, hey.
Well, and then there is like the best mysteries, which I know is what Branagh wanted to make, are the ones where you don't go like, couldn't they have figured out one of the other 3 people in the house committed the murder? Like the very best mysteries that have ever been written are the ones where there are no moments of like, whoa.
Yeah.
And there's very few of those.
I honestly I'm sort of saying like I just wish I'd had a little bit more motivation for Roman to
Mhm.
take the fall. Because effectively, like, he had to know it was either Inga or Frankie. There are only 4 people in the house and one of them's dead.
Yeah.
And he knows he didn't do it.
Yeah.
So he had to know it was one of the 2 of them.
Yeah.
So I guess we're meant to kind of assume, because we do hear him defending them.
Yeah.
So there's that. I think there's also a degree to which I'm holding him to a slightly higher standard too, because there's a degree to which I feel like in my point about, or in my sort of question about discernment between smart and pretentious, Branagh, like when I look at it now, and I read someone sort of say this, I'll see if I can find it and put it in the show notes. Like, I didn't quite follow. It may have even been contemporaneous, because there's not a whole lot written. Like, people aren't really talking about it that much anymore.
Yeah.
But contemporaneously, there were folks who loved it and hated it. And the folks who hated it were sort of like, he's trying to pull one over on us. Like, he's trying to make us think it's high art when it's really just entertaining. Or he is somehow like making fun of us for wanting to be entertained, us being Americans specifically. You know, that we have Branagh, Thompson, and Jacoby, who are the 3 leads effectively, all British actors. And Branagh and Thompson playing American characters in the 90s version, and Thompson playing an American woman in Margaret, Branagh playing this, like, with this German accent for Roman Strauss. One person points out that even like when we first meet Mike on screen, he's parked in this old convertible and somebody yells like, "Hey man, you're on the wrong side of the road." Like, was that like an inside joke about the fact that he's British? Like, that's what this one commentator was saying. Like, and like this like big Hollywood story, like this Hollywood intrigue is the center of this story. Like,
why was that commentator thinking that? What evidence did they give that he's making fun of Americans wanting to be entertained?
They were suggesting that this was a film that just wouldn't go over with Brits.
I
don't know if I buy it. I don't know if I buy it, but that's what they were suggesting.
But
I don't know.
Like that also doesn't necessarily tell me that he's making fun of Americans. That could be a young British filmmaker who loved American films.
Totally. I mean, because it definitely feels like a send up of like the 40s.
Oh yeah. Like he's doing the hard-boiled private detective genre.
Yes.
And like, okay, it's a very American genre, but that doesn't mean that other people can't take it, run with it, and do something fun with it.
Yeah, totally. So I don't know. I'm not, this isn't like a fully baked idea, but like there's something, I think maybe with the influence of this commentator who I'm not sure I followed, but their words are cooking. And the degree to which there's like all of this like either or thinking in this film, like even the you're a smoker or you're not.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I reject that.
Yeah, that's not how it works. That's not how addiction works.
So there's all of this sort of either or thinking, even like it's fate or it's not. It's poppycock or it's not. Like you're Roman or you're Margaret. Like, there's a lot of either or thinking that is sort of the undercurrent of this film, of the conflict in this film, even. You know, like even Margaret has to choose between Gray Baker and her husband.
Well, so you were talking about how like Branagh is brilliant. Like, he really is. He's also pretentious. Some of that pretension comes out, I think, in wanting to do the thinking for us, in that like the either or thinking. So like he's feeding to us like, these are the 2 options you have available to you, instead of allowing the audience to come to their own conclusions about stuff. And that's part of why I both love and hate his Poirot films. Is he is doing some things brilliantly, and then some things he's deciding for us who Poirot is, contrary to how Agatha Christie wrote him, contrary to how the character is, because he's decided this is the right way. So, and I think that's part of what pretentiousness is like, I know better and I'm going to go with it in some ways. I might be talking out of my hat.
No, I don't think you are. I'm processing what you're saying, because I do think that there's something, even in the sort of like gender swap, reincarnation, fate or no fate, like they broke the cycle. Like, I wonder if it could have been like what a different movie it would have been, like what a different viewing experience if some of that had been left a little less
decided.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little more ambiguous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah. I wonder what a viewer experience was if there was a little bit more left for us to kind of discern on our own or imagine on our own.
Yeah, honestly, like, again, I don't want to like overtake with talking about Poirot, but Murder on the Orient Express was fantastic. And I really, really liked it in a lot of ways, except for the mustache, because what the fuck? That is not what the mustache is supposed to look like. Also, backstory that Poirot had a woman who he loved and lost, like he was asexual. But the other aspect of it is Poirot is like, well, I can't let you get away with this because like I am. And like there's a sense that he might be neurodivergent or something like that at the end. And that's not how Christie wrote. And it felt like because Branagh wanted a bow to tie it up with, when there is often ambiguity in Agatha Christie. Now, like you always know who did it. She always makes sure justice prevails for the most part in some way. But justice for her is often extrajudicial justice. And people like committing suicide to avoid being.
That's what happens in the movie, The Orient Express.
No.
Oh, no, sorry. I'm thinking of the Nile.
Yeah, definitely.
I haven't seen Orient Express.
Yeah. And that's something where like ambiguity is not a bad thing for a story.
Mm-hmm.
And your interpretation is not necessarily the right interpretation, Ken.
well, especially in a story about reincarnation.
Yeah.
Or about the possibility of reincarnation, about the possibility of fate, right? Because it's not just about sort of motives and like justice. It's also about like the nature of the universe and human existence.
Well, and Mike Church is like, so Grace thinks that she was Margaret and Mike was Roman. And Mike is like, all of this is poppycock. Okay, it's not poppycock, but I'm not Roman. I'm not Roman. Like it's still this very like, when he discovers that he was Margaret, that's like, whoa, this is the thing that blows my mind. Like it's kind of glossing over the wonder of it all. It's like it's accepting something really ridiculous because you're fighting against the smaller ridiculousness within it.
Right. Yeah. And the clarity of the memories of the past lives also, I feel like, to your point, kind of erases some of the wonder and the like, just like weirdness of the fact that we're talking about people who've been dead for 40 years. Mm-hmm. So anyway, those are just the things that I wanted to talk about. I mean, it's a beautiful movie. These people are beautiful. Emma Thompson in particular was
she was gorgeous.
Absolutely gorgeous.
I mean, she's still gorgeous, but
she is. And she was at the height of her sort of
luminosity.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really showed off well. And the romance between Roman and Margaret is believable and beautiful and like magnetic. Like even the way there's a scene when they're first like the thing with the, I think it's, I don't even know. There's a scene where he's like sort of kissing her hand, her knuckles, and he's sort of moving toward her while still just like kissing her hand. It is so hot. And it's like not sexual, but it is like the chemistry of it is just really palpable. And the connection between the two of them just really like comes off the screen. You really believe it. And all of that in the black and white sort of Hollywood glamour of the 40s, which interestingly, like we make reference to World War II repeatedly, because Gray Baker says he misses the war because news is boring now. And Strauss had to escape Germany. And yet we don't acknowledge any kind of Jewish identity, which is still feels like really weird to me. But maybe it was Branagh just not wanting to touch that. I don't know. But he did touch it. It's like he touched it but didn't name it.
It's either do it or don't do it.
Kinda.
You're either going to mention the war or you're not going to mention the war. You're a smoker or you're not a smoker. Do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah. So that's a little bit weird, but also like, I don't know. So
I also wonder if that was like, because it's the era of colorblind, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. If he thought he was being more sensitive as a Gentile, British, blonde man. Like, you know what? I'm just not going to mention it. I'll let people draw their own conclusions. He could have thought he was being sensitive that way. So
maybe. Totally. Maybe.
So there are two things that I remember very vividly. One is when she first comes back to his apartment, he lends her some clothes, and the jeans she's wearing are not his jeans.
No.
It's the other thing I remember. It was a couple years later. We were watching it on TV, the whole family. And there's a scene in the 1949 where Emma Thompson as Margaret is wearing like this like clingy silk dress, and you can see a little bit of her belly. And I remember saying something about it, and everyone being like, "What are you talking about? She looks great." And I just wanted to bring that up because the level of body expectations that I had as a 12-year-old were really toxic, that I felt like not only did I think it, but I felt the need to say it out loud in front of our whole family, that like, wow, she's got a belly there or something like that. And she does, because she's a human being.
Right.
I remember like holding both of those things at the same time, like that, she's wearing these jeans. She looks fantastic, and they're definitely not men's jeans. And also, belly. And just the amount of pressure that we put on women's bodies that I definitely internalized is so overwhelming. And that I very vividly remember that moment watching that movie, and then thinking like, when everyone was like, no to me, I remember thinking like, I got to rethink some things. Like I remember being like, okay, this is definitely me. This is not the family being wrong.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me see if I can reflect back some of the things that we talked about. So I spent a lot of time talking about the ways in which I romanticized the romance. I did that on purpose, especially the one between Mike and Grace.
Mm-hmm.
The one between Roman and Margaret had some similar friction, but in them, Margaret was less fully vulnerable. Like she was able to push back in more powerful ways than in the moments that I sort of laid out in our conversation between Mike and Grace. And I think that there are ways in which, because it all works out, and because we learn that that Mike is the reincarnation of Margaret, that I sort of like forgave or excused kind of bad behavior on his part. And not only in the way he behaved and sort of shoving the scissors at her because she said she was scared of him, but also when he does apologize, he doesn't say, I'm sorry I overreacted. I'm sorry I took it personally. He says, I'm sorry, I would never hurt you, which is not very reassuring from someone who's just been kind of emotionally abusive. We also talked about sort of, this was less cohesive thought, but we talked a bit about the way in which there's sort of an either or thinking, like a series of either ors that undergird this film that end up, I don't know if we said it quite this clearly, but I'm going to go ahead and make this assertion that the nature of the either or that Branagh leans on over and over and over again ends up having him do some thinking for us. Like he removes some options for us, which then end up sort of diminishing the power of the story in some ways, because it removes some of the wonder of the fact that this is a reincarnation story. Because like, as you point out, we're so busy like thinking about the gender swap. We like stop thinking about the like, holy cow, like these two people were reincarnated and ended up running into each other again. And wait, what? Reincarnation? Like, so the nature of this, like over and over and over again, either or, you're a smoker or you're not. It's fate or it's random. And the answers are not smoker, fate, rather than like it's complicated. It means that Branagh is doing some thinking for us that I think you propose that is a form of pretension, where his smarts, he makes himself superior to his viewer.
And that might have been what the commentator you were mentioning was reacting to.
Yeah, agreed. I'm just thinking this through. It is interesting that we have this Robin Williams character who definitely plays in the gray, although he is one of the people who names the either or, because he's the one who gives us, you're a smoker or you're not. that comes from Robin Williams. But he also lives in this gray as this like former therapist who slept with his patients, but is like, but I cared about them. He's gross. So gross. Anyway, I named that in the person of Margaret Strauss. We have this like really whole and badass woman, like successful pianist. We kind of get that she is a full partner in her marriage with Roman, not just like arm candy. And that I still really enjoyed. Really enjoyed. And even like we see a lot of friction in their marriage, but like the moment that we initially are invited to believe was the cause of her murder, when we're left to think it was him that did it, is actually a moment that brings them closer together. So that too felt like even for 15-year-old Tracie kind of idolized that. And I'm not sure I want to emulate that in romantic relationship, but I'm not sure it would lead me completely astray in the same way that I think that like romanticizing Mike Church would.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the fact that Branagh put a Jewish refugee as his protagonist, but never named the fact that he was Jewish, which feels like weird and cowardly kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Although at the time he maybe thought that was a more sensitive thing to do since he is not in fact Jewish. This film does pass Bechdel, though I don't know that I would characterize it as feminist. And what am I forgetting?
Just holding up again that for the criticisms we're lobbying against this, it is very well constructed and beautiful. Branagh did a really, really good job. And like to the point of like that commentator who thought that he was making fun of Americans for wanting to be entertained. I haven't read it, but I would push back on that because to me, Branagh's career as a director has always struck me as wanting to take a genre he likes and make it his own. I feel like that's what he's done with the Poirot films. And I feel like he liked hard-boiled private detective mystery type movies, and he wanted to make it his own. And he kept it in America because that's a very American genre. Mm-hmm. But he did bring, like, he brought 3 British actors to play the main characters. I think that is, he's very good at what he does. He has some blind spots that I don't know that he's ever, like, grown from or learned from. But in some ways he doesn't have to because he's so good. Mm-hmm. You know, like, he could be even better, but I don't know that he has the ability to look at what he does and push through to the even better because he does like deciding for us. Mm-hmm. You know, he knows he's smart. He's very smart. And so he kind of rests on that. And that creates some really gorgeous and very entertaining movies that for the most part, I'm really happy to watch. Although some of them afterwards I will rant for a few minutes about certain aspects of it.
Yeah. So
next time I am going to be bringing you my deep thoughts about Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, shit.
I am really, I'm interested and excited to rewatch it, because I haven't seen it in probably 25 years. And it has, since I have come to understand how the difficulties and marginalization that transgender people experience. Like, I did not understand that last time I saw the movie. So that is going to really inform my view of it this time. I'm really interested and kind of excited to talk to you about my experience of reading the book, which I think I might have told you it's the only time I've ever thrown a book across the room.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you did. You did.
So I don't know if I told you on the air or not, but
no, I don't think so. So I look forward to it.
I'll get to it next week.
I look forward to that.
So that's what I'm bringing next week. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I'll look forward to hearing it.
All right.
Talk to you then. This show is a labor of love, but that doesn't make it free to produce. If you enjoy it even half as much as we do, please consider helping to keep us overthinking. You can support us at our Patreon. There's a link in the show notes. Or leave a positive review so others can find us. And of course, share the show with your people. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes.
Thank you to Resonate Recordings for editing today's episode.
Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?